And with Dr. Johnson is Bernie Moreno. Bernie is a graduate of University of Michigan. Go Blue. Come on. There we go. One of the most amazing things as I've gotten to know Bernie and his powerful immigrant story is just his passion, not just for process, but for people and this community. It comes through so strong, particularly in the area of education. That education, both for Dr. Johnson and for Bernie, education truly is the focus of their passion. Today, Bernie has made it possible for so many of the young people in the room to be with us today through his sponsorship. So while he began his career in Michigan in the auto industry, pursuing that, and then coming to Cleveland to buy, was it your first dealership? And now seeing dealerships across a number of states, education is that central theme that drives him, and it's so clear and powerful to see. Bernie is an amazing businessman, but he's an incredible philanthropist and has done so much for the Cleveland community, the United States, and the globe. Will you please join me in welcoming Bernie Moreno.
Bernie Moreno is exemplary of the multicultural focus that Cleveland and other large cities need to take in order to not only create momentum, but sustain important programs to ensure that they promote the advancement of society. I can't think of a better person to represent that cause. He, in the words of Langston Hughes, has not had a spoon-fed life. Life ain't been no what they call crystal stair. His stairs had splinters, no carpet, but all the time he was climbing, reaching landings, and turning corners, sometimes in the dark. That poem is Mother to Son, and it exemplifies the influence that Bernie's mother has had on his life. At an early age, she moved Bernie and his siblings to southern Florida, intent on ensuring that they become all that they can be, and by any measure, she has been truly successful. In addition to Bernie, she has produced a former ambassador, a real estate mogul, and an international banker. So the question is, Bernie, what happened to you? Just some cars. In fact, that's the way she introduces Bernie, as her car salesman. And speaking of salesmen, I really enjoy that commercial that you are starring in now for your companies, where you're talking about all the benefits of owning a used car and the support that your company gives for those individuals seeking that. So why don't we begin? We all know your history, and I think Margaret did a great job in that regard, starting us off. But you fell in love with cars very, very early, and you decided to go to the University of Michigan because it placed you closer to Detroit. But before you went to the University of Michigan, you actually sent a letter to the GM of General Motors, or the chairman of the board of General Motors, and you gave him some advice on how he could improve his business practices. Am I right? I was 13. Yeah, you were 13. But he wrote you back. He did. And he said, I hope in the future, when you come and take over my job, that GM is still in great financial condition. But it wasn't. But then it became in better financial condition. And that's just one example of your, I think, your ambition to ensure that you reach your ultimate goal. not only attending the University of Michigan, but also ensuring that you were working closely with car magazines and different things to understand that industry. So, tell the audience a little bit about these experiences and the personal, emotional, and cultural attributes you believe enabled you to pursue them, to promote your career and choice and path.
Yeah, well, thank you. Very humbled by your introduction, by the way. But so, as Dr. Johnson mentioned, my family moved to the United States in 1971, just before I turned 5. I have 6 siblings. I'm the youngest. And when my mom was educated in the U.S., my dad was educated in the U.S., so they spoke English. But at home, when I was 4, I wasn't learning English right away. So when we moved here, my mom, her philosophy is throw the baby in the pool to learn how to swim. So she enrolled me in school right away. And I said, well, Mom, they don't speak Spanish there. And she goes, well, then learn how to speak English. And now keep in mind, this is 1971. I think if you were growing up in Miami today, you'd have no problem with the Spanish part. And so as school started, I started to learn English. The story I like to tell, which probably make a little bit of people uncomfortable, is when you're learning a language, you have to learn patterns, because that's the only way you can kind of defend yourself. So the first thing I did is Schoolhouse Rock. There was a 25th anniversary the other day, and I'm like, oh my God, I know every song. Because that's, you sat in front of it, conjunction, junction, what's your function, right? and so you learn these words, and the one word I heard that didn't make any sense, and I wasn't allowed to ask my mom what words meant. I had to figure it out myself. So if I heard a word, I had to do everything I could to satisfy her that I did everything I could to understand its meaning. So the word that I heard over and over again at school, but it was sometimes not just at school, but I heard it a lot, was the word spick. I had no idea what that meant. And I looked it up in a dictionary, it's not there. And I asked my siblings, they just laughed at me. So finally I said, okay, I gotta ask my mom what this means. So I said to her, she goes, oh, that's a very important word. And I said, oh, well, what does it mean? She goes, well, when Americans came to the US, they mostly were poor peasants that came from Europe. And they had no choice but to leave their country and come to the US. Okay, this is US history, it's taught by my mom. She says, when our ancestors came to Colombia, they were kings and rulers and educated people. And what that word means is acknowledgement that you're better than they are. And they're acknowledging that. And it means smart people in Colombia. And I'm like, what an amazing country.
Yes.
It's so welcoming.
Yes.
And so you talk about Michigan, so that's what I thought. So when somebody would say that to me, I'd be like, oh, well, thank you so much, that's very nice. And the person would just look at me, which I never thought anything of. I thought it was, well, they're just, it's a sign of respect. Yeah. And then I went to Michigan. I got a call the summer before I got my freshman year, and they said, we want to give you a scholarship, the National Hispanic Achievement Award. And I'm like, Hispanic? I don't even know what that word means. So I asked my mom what Hispanic means. She goes, don't worry about that. So I never exposed to it. And then when my roommate in college called me that, I said, well, that doesn't make any sense because you're saying that I'm stupid. And he goes, what do you think that word means? And I told him, he goes, dude, that's not what it means. That's not what that means. But I think the point is that it empowered me to think differently when other people attack you, which is very common, I think, in business and in personal lives. That really the lesson I got from that is if you let somebody put you down, they will put you down. But if you don't allow them to put you down, and you have that strength, that it's really their issue, not yours, I think it lets you accomplish anything you want.
That's, thank you very much. And I was going to ask you, the follow-up question was, did you allow the fact that you are of Hispanic descent, often referred to sometimes as a minority, dictate how you responded to situations similar to the ones that you experienced early in life, or during the time that you were at the University of Michigan, or in your business dealings?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you the follow-up. Now, obviously, that's a kid, right? So you're growing up and you're very impressionable for your mom. So fast forward, when we moved to Cleveland, we took over a Mercedes dealership that was doing about $16 million a year in sales, about 200 cars a year. That same dealership will do $250 million in sales, just that one dealership. and we took it from 200 cars to 3,000. And the first 12 to 24 to 36 months we were here, which I actually think, and I don't want, this is not about pity, I actually love these stories.
Yes.
The story in the dealership community was that I was a Colombian drug dealer, and that this is a money laundering operation, which I thought was pretty cool.
I heard that too. So. I just want you to know it's out there, Bridget, it's out there.
But I thought that was great, give me major street cred. But I think what happens is I look at that situation, you look at it and say, you can make yourself mad and say, well, why is it that people are not recognizing success and instead feeling it like this is an excuse? But the reality is, in that particular case, it was really great from my perspective, because if that's truly what they thought, then they really weren't prepared to compete with me. Because how do you compete with a money laundering drug king? You can't, right? So they didn't choose to compete with me. So from my perspective, I love that. That wound up being out there. And it wasn't, by the way, one or two people. This was absolutely the word on the street among everybody.
I think it was reported in Cleveland.com and Crank.
That's how you know it's not true.
I like that. I can't use that one though. So you're anticipating my next question. So I must have did a good job. All right. So the question is, you had an experience when you bought your first dealership. Bridget was with you when you made your initial visit to take a look at the North Olmsted Mercedes-Benz dealership, and you had a reaction. Can you talk a little bit about that? But more specifically, I want you to put it in context. And the question I have for you: how and why did you choose Cleveland as your headquarters, and what does your choice say about this region then, now, and in the future? And while you're doing it, if you don't mind, just give us an update on where you are with your company.
This is like taking oral essay.
Absolutely.
This is my
I know you can handle that. I mean, you're on the Tri-City Foundation board, you're on the CSU board, so you should be able to answer this one.
Absolutely, absolutely. So Cleveland chose me. So what happened was Mercedes-Benz was opening a new dealership in 2005 in Phoenix market. Now remember, in 2005, the world was really great in terms of the economy, really going forward. Phoenix was growing like crazy. In fact, I met a doorman one time at an event out there who owned 6 houses. I mean, the world was going pretty crazy out in Phoenix. And so Mercedes had decided to open a new dealership there. So what they did is they said to Roger Penske, who owned the dealership I purchased from him, they said, we want you to sell North Olmsted because it's performing poorly. And in exchange, we'll give you outright this new point in Phoenix. So for him, crappy dealership in North Olmsted, beautiful dealership in Phoenix, beef, I'm in. And the stipulation was that Mercedes got to choose the dealer, and the dealer had to be a minority. And that was the rules. So they had a few different candidates. They ended up choosing me. So when we walked in that dealership, my wife and I looked at each other, having lived in Boston for 12 years. I grew up in Florida. Cleveland I had never been to in my life. Certainly the PR Cleveland and reality of Cleveland aren't aligned. Certainly in Boston, I just say that. So, my wife, part of the deal was we had to stay here for 5 years. So we looked at each other and said, can we do 5 years of hard time in Cleveland? Like a prison sentence, but can we do it? And so when we came there, the salesperson who greeted us, I was undercover, said that when I said to him, I'm thinking of moving to Cleveland.
Well, undercover may not be the word you want to use, given the fact that you are a Colombian drug lord. I mean,
that's true. That's true. Not witness protection.
What's the shopper? You go out and see what
we were pretending to be clients, and I said, listen, I'm going to either buy a Mercedes or Lexus, and I'm moving here. Which car do you recommend? I'm hoping, like, is there something there? And the guy says, I don't understand. And so I went to repeat myself, and he said, I'm not stupid. I heard what you said. I just don't understand why you moved to Cleveland. And he went on for 5 minutes, which I remember because my brain went blank, because my wife was bawling in tears. And the salesperson just kept talking about every reason why Cleveland, Ohio is the worst place on earth to live. And so we then went over to Mally's chocolates and bought about 20 pounds worth of chocolate. Had my wife binge in the car to get her neutralized. And we went And the reality was that for me, it was an eye-opener. Wow, what an opportunity. Because if this is this person's attitude, all we have to do is just be a little bit better than horrible, and we're in really good shape. And so now 11 years have gone by, and what I've found is that the reality of Cleveland is so much better than even our wildest expectations. This is a community you can make a difference in. It's a community that is incredibly welcoming. And for us, we have dealerships now in Boston, Northern Kentucky, Miami, and this is still home, because you can make a real difference in this community, and it's really great.
Well, we're so glad that you and Bridget chose to overlook your secret shopper experience and decided to stay with us. And Bridget, since we are mentioning you so much, why don't you please stand and receive a well.
Alex, we can't let her off the hook too much, because I noticed that we're skipping past, Bridget, as you can see, is tried and true Indiana right there. And I just want you to know that, we talk about biases. When Bridget asked me out, that's true, because I'm the only person that she knew had a car. That's right? And she needed to get to her uncle's wedding in Valpo. We lived in Ann Arbor. And I got out of the car first. Bridget was getting her suitcase, and so I knocked on the door. Her mom answered the door, looked me dead in the eye, and says, "You're not as dark as I thought you'd be."
I was going to ask you, how did you meet Bridget, but we were going to save that one for last. So you got a lot of filling in to do. So the next question is this. Okay. So we know that you've been very successful, but your road to success has not been without its challenges and its bumps along the way. Most notably was the 2011 bankruptcy of Saab that left you with 158 cars without warranties that you had to liquidate. In some instances, you sold them at rock bottom prices and at a loss. And more recently, in an attempt to establish a dealership in Coral Gables, it was reported in automotive news that the competing dealership is suing you, claiming that the $6.6 million subsidy you will receive is unfair and is based on the fact that you're a minority.
Yep.
Talk about this episode and what you learned from those two that you can share with individuals in the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first context, as Alex said, my parents had a good life in Colombia. Colombia's the kind of country that I don't think we want to be. And I think that's really important now, because there's so much talk about taking this country in a completely different direction. I joke that Colombia and South America has not only exported drugs to the U.S., which are addictive and bad for people and do all kinds of societal harm, but the one that's being exported now is worse. It's called populism. The idea that there's a very rich group, a small group of rich people and a big group of poor people, and the idea that somebody's going to come in here and fix that, and by creating division and hatred, is a really dangerous thing. So from my perspective, my parents came to the U.S., provided me all the education in the world, which is why Bridget and I are so passionate about that, because we do have that leg up. That my parents, it was never a question of what school I could go to or what resources I had available to me. Now, once I turned 22, the deal was, you're on your own. And that meant everything including, up to and including buying the company that I purchased back in 2005. And so when I did that, I mortgaged everything I owned in my life. I mean, every dollar I'd ever seen, I put into buying this dealership, but I still needed about $900,000 as a loan, and it was not a loan probably that would be given today. Let's just say that. Thank God it was 2005, pre-economic disaster. But I'd gotten this loan, and I'd taken every dollar, like literally, if you can imagine every dollar you've ever had, it's wired out of an account one day. And that happened on Friday. And on Monday, I'm sitting in front of the 20 employees that we're now looking to hire. And this guy comes in from the bank. And he says to me, "Hey, we have some bad news." And I said, "What's that?" He said, "Well, your loan requires 2 signatures, and there's only going to be 1. I'm like, well, that's interesting detail. How does that affect me? For the bankers in the room know what that means. The non-bankers in the room are like, yeah, what does that mean? And so I asked him, and he goes, "Well, you need 2 signatures. I'm like, I get it. How does that affect me? And he said, "Well, that means there is no loan." Now, the money I had wired out on Friday there's not like a money-back guarantee. The dealerships, it's gone. And it's called hard money, means you lose it. And so I said, well, that doesn't seem right, that there's no loan. And he says, well, nothing you can do, I'm sorry. And so I called the chairman of the board of the bank, who happened to be on the board of directors of the Royal Bank of Scotland, who I met in Boston. And I said, hey, don't tell me 24 hours before closing I can lend money. You should have told me that 3 weeks ago. I mean, this puts me in a really bad position. So he signed as a second signature on that loan. And so that's kind of where the world started for me. It wasn't certainly easy. And then we're cruising along really well, and then all of a sudden Lehman Brothers, Bear Stearns, economic crash happens. Car sales go from 17 million to 10. And we did the opposite of what everybody else was doing. We staffed up, we added more services, more loaner cars. And I figured, I can work the aisle at McDonald's and sell a lot of Big Macs. This doesn't work out. So we put all in, and it worked really well because there were still people buying cars, and people were buying cars and servicing cars, loved our service, and so we grew dramatically during that period. And General Motors came to me and asked me to buy the Saab dealership, which we did. We became the largest Saab dealership in the world. We were the first dealer to build this all-new, incredible Saab facility. And I was on vacation down in Florida, and my cell phone is next to my bed with the ringer turned off. It's a hard and fast rule for my house. And so I woke up in the morning, looked at it, and it was a text message from the chairman of the board of Saab Spiker. And it says, I tried as hard as I could. I'm sorry. That's what it said. And at that point, we had about 150 some odd cars. Well, we made a decision to liquidate the inventory at 50% off, which cost us about $3 million. To then back the clients who we had sold cars to with a warranty, where we honored the warranty ourselves, which cost us another $1 million. And that was pretty much all the money we had in the entire company at that point, just to live through that. Plus, we had spent $3.5 million building this beautiful dealership. So we got through that crisis, and that worked out well, and we continued to grow. And now Coral Gables is funny because what you have to do is, there's a message out there for the kids out there who are in tough circumstances in your life. You're always going to have people who, to use a kid's term, hate on you. Okay? And what you got to do is you have to have a shield that does not allow yourself to internalize that. So yes, the dealer down there is saying all these things. Here's what's not reported in that article. They offered him the exact same incentives they offered me. But he wants to make it about race, he wants to make it about the fact that I'm a minority. And if you allow yourself to engage in that conversation, you're only empowering that person. What you do instead is know that you're right, go down there, open a dealership, and kick his ass. That's what you do. And then that's how we
do. So you can see in Bernie's discussion with you today that not only is he ambitious, supportive of our community, depends upon his family for strength, but he's also an astute businessman. He's been recognized by J.D. Power, Ernst & Young, and Crane's Business, and some of his business principles are legendary. Let me give you a couple. Don't try, do. How many of you have heard of that before? Where does it come from? Where?
Star Wars?
Star Wars, absolutely. Yoda.
Yeah, you always have to have a geeky Star Wars reference in every meeting.
Another one, destroy and create to produce a great business culture. How to cultivate managerial talent. Commandments or business dictates, and the first is, thou shalt have fun. Talk a little bit about those, and are there any multicultural elements? But generally, can you just share with the audience today where these principles come from and what they've done, for example, to make you one of the most productive automobile executives in America, and the fact that you have service, customer service, client service, that's incomparable.
Well, like I said, the first thing is this idea that you're not going to allow yourself to be victimized by others. You're not going to buy. You know, there's so, you know, the world. Even though we graduate from high school and junior high never graduates from us. I mean, there's always people that are going to attack you. There's always people who are going to say negative things about you. The culture of negativity is so easy to embrace. It's just out there. You turn on the news. right? It's very seldom that you turn on a news channel and there's a positive story. Look at Cleveland, right? There's so many great things that happen here, but you have to find them. They're not reported in the newspaper or in magazines or in TV. It's just not. It's just easier to talk about all the negative things that happen. And you know what? Whenever I find myself, and this will sound really corny and maybe it's a little too personal to share, but when I find myself in situations where things are tough, like I mentioned the Saab situation, the bank situation, sometimes I step back from it and say that, you know, God's blessed me. I have a great family. I have a great mom. I have a great dad. I have a beautiful wife. I have great kids. I don't want to get greedy. And, you know, if something's going to happen and it's going to happen, then so be it. But at the end of the day, I still have all of those things that nothing and no one can ever take away. And that helps me kind of clean my mind or clear my mind so that when I go forward on these things, I can come at it without having anger, because anger doesn't help you make good decisions. There's plenty of reasons to be angry. You know, when my parents were in Florida, they wanted to join the country club. My dad was the chief of surgeon of the local hospital. He had been Secretary of Health in Colombia. And this country club wouldn't let him there because he said we had too many dark friends. And you want to get angry, but at the end of the day, you look at it and you really think of it as, really, I'm sad for them. That their only viewpoint is that's how they view people. It's really a reflection on them, not on me. And I think the way you change those things is for the kids out there, especially you know, whether you're a woman, minority, African American, Hispanic, whatever the case may be, you change those things not through anger and hatred. And you just don't, even though you want to. Believe me, there's times you really, really want to. You change it by getting into these positions, and then people look at you differently. I'll talk about, you know, Bridget's mom. You know, you're not as dark as you should be. I wanted to say you're not as ignorant as I thought you'd be. But I figured probably not the best thing on a first date. Right. Say that until later. But you know, the reality is, 3 years later when we got married, her parents had completely changed their perception of what Hispanics were all about. And it happened through love and not through hatred, if that makes sense.
It does indeed, and in fact, you and Bridget have decided to ensure that this community benefits from your support and your philanthropy. In addition to serving on the Tri-C Board, CSU, you're also a member of the Greater Cleveland Partnership, the RNC Host Committee, the Cleveland Foundation, Destination Cleveland, the Opportunity Corridor, and the list goes on and on and on. So you have made it your company's responsibility to give back, and that's part of your culture. Can you talk a little bit about why you feel that's important? There was a nice article in Smart Business that described that, but I want you to tell the audience in your own words what it means to you and Bridget to give back.
Well, again, you know, I was very, very, very blessed. There's no question about that. You'll be shocked, Dr. Johnson, I'm going to use a car racing analogy.
Okay.
So I look at my own kids. I have 4 amazing kids, and they, so if you imagine life is a race, like a car race, my kids start with a pretty good car, figurative car, in a really good position. They're right, they call it the pole position in racing. Yeah, they're really up there, and they got this nice car, they got a good pit crew, and they're ready to run this race. Now, they don't necessarily have to win the race, because there's plenty of people who start first and finish last. But if you look at some kids in our community, they don't even have a car, yet they're in that same race. They're starting the next day, and they're expected to finish first. And while it would be incredibly gratifying to take money from one group and give it to another, there's plenty of people, believe me, in the luxury car world, there's a lot of people whose income should be redistributed. Your rich license should be revoked because you're just such a jerk. But it's just not an effective policy. You just can't implement that. It's not possible. But I call it redistributing opportunity, which is really what's important, which is the idea that you can't take that kid and give them the perfect car close to the front, but man, we got to do our best to give them a fighting chance.
Yes.
And then what they do from there is going to be up to them. And not all of them are going to win, and some of them will disappoint. But more often than not, you see these stories. Bridget has kids that she mentors over at Breakthrough that are just these amazing kids. And I tell you, I look at them and I say, it's so rewarding to see these kids who have everything stacked against them, yet through miracles they can succeed and do wondrous things. And I think that's ultimately what changes the conversation in the long run.
Thank you so much. Let's extend Bernie a nice round of applause. His openness and his honesty today, what a remarkable contributor to the betterment of this community. And in addition to his lovely wife, Bridget, his children are Catherine, Emily, Adam, and Kevin. So thank you very much, Bernie.
Thank you.
Margaret, do we have time for Q&A? Or
We do.
Okay.
We do. Thank you. Incredible conversation.
So I see there's microphones on either side of the room.
Microphones.
If you'd like to approach one.
Yep.
And we'll
like
get
to
Bernie
get us
to answer
started.
some additional questions for us.
I know the main question that's your mind is that is out of the show time a good time to buy a car? And the answer is yes. I'm just kidding.
Margaret Bernstein, WKYC, where we see the possible.
That's right, that's right. There is positive news
There
on
is.
television. Don't forget that, see the possible.
No, I agree with you.
In there.
I should have mentioned that. That's true.
Yes, that's
true.
right. You kind of alluded to this, but I just wanted to hear you talk a little bit more about your faith and how it factors into the way you do your job, because you kind of talked about that a bit.
Yeah, faith, my mom is a hardcore Catholic. When you're Catholic, you kind of have an a la carte menu. My mom buys the whole buffet. There's the Pope says a certain thing. My older son is gay, and when I was growing up, my mom would make comments like, "There's only gay people in America. That's not a Colombian thing." And it's evil and the devil and all these things. But the minute the Pope said, "Who am I to judge?" my mom's conversation turned. And it goes back to, I think like things like gay marriage, that changed because a lot of us watch Modern Family. And we watch these two guys and we say, you know what? They're good parents. They're great people. They're not this distorted thing that is out there. And I think those are the kinds of ways that you can break down stereotypes. When it comes to faith, for me, it's very personal. There's no question in my mind that there's a superior being out there that guides us. To what extent he does or doesn't, I don't know. I don't look at myself as being smart enough to try to figure that out. But it does guide me in the sense that all of us at one point or another are tested to see what's really in our heart, what's in our soul. And how we respond to that, I think, has a lot to do with how much belief we have in the idea that somebody else is out there that's greater and bigger than all of us. So that's how I look at it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Well,
I really enjoyed your speech, by the way. Very humorous. I think we all would like some American history from your mom. That would be quite an entertaining experience.
It's not necessarily accurate.
But it will be definitely memorable.
it's her story.
So what would you say has helped you the most in becoming culturally competent?
There is just, I think, recognizing that that humans as a people are very tribal. We talked about this at lunch the other day. We root for, when everybody said Michigan, we root for Ohio State, even though it's in Columbus, but it's the kind of the closest thing to us. So we're very tribal people. So we're always I think it's important to recognize that people are afraid of people who are different than we are. So it's just fear. You're not really dealing. Sometimes we go to hate right away. Like we think, oh, they hate me. It's not hate. They just are afraid because they just don't know. And I think if you can keep that in your mind and help them realize that there's really nothing to fear, that the reality is we all come from such different perspectives. And I think in today's, the biggest thing that America has versus every other country is a story that a guy told me in Japan, actually, this executive from Nissan. He says, what's amazing about the United States is that when I go to New York City, people ask me for directions. And I sat there and went, what do you mean by that? And he goes, that would never happen in Japan. If you see somebody who looks American or white in Japan, a Japanese guy wouldn't say, you know, clearly you're a foreigner. But this Japanese guy who speaks Japanese, it would be normal for him to be an American who would know how to guide you in New York City. And that's what makes America amazing. And I think if we recognize that the more we have viewpoints that come together as a table, it's a good thing, not a bad thing. I was, obviously last month was Martin Luther King's birthday. I mean, I go down to the JFK library in Boston and you hear his speech, and they have it there because they're playing it, and they have JFK listening to it. And I love JFK's facial expression listening to that speech, because he's in there going, damn, it's so much better than me. That's like the word bubble that I see in his face. And but you listen to that speech and it's amazing, right? But look how, and I think sometimes we have to be really proud. The job is not finished, but we have to be proud of what we've accomplished so far. You know, here he talks about in that speech that the owners of slaves would be sharing table with the sons and daughters of slaves. Well, isn't that what we're doing right now? And that's a dream that isn't that old. And that's pretty. Again, it doesn't mean we're in happy land and everything's perfect, but man, we've come a long way. And I'm completely convinced, when I look at my kids and the way he interacts with his friends, that this country is going to be in really good shape in the next 20 or 30 years. We just got to keep at it. I think it's all our responsibilities to keep at it. Where if we hear things, we don't ignore it, because I think that's the silent majority is the one that I think is the people that enable the very vocal minority. So if you hear something bad, it's your responsibility to say it. I worked for a company in Boston that I was told, hey, be careful hiring so many minorities. You know, that's not, you know, be careful of that. And you have to, as a business person, you can't just ignore that. You have to step up and say, that is wrong. You are dead wrong. And then hire people who are minorities that prove that case wrong. Because that's ultimately the most powerful thing you can do. And, but, you know, it's the expression, you know, hear something, say something. I think when it comes to that, with race, you have to stand up for it. You have to stand up and fight.
One last question.
Good afternoon. I'm Lowell Perry, Cleveland Central Promise neighborhood. Enjoyed the conversation just far. Question for either of you gentlemen, maybe both of you want to do this as we move into the individual discussions around here. The importance of civic engagement. You know, we've like eliminated civics basically from our schools, but if we're going to create real change in our communities, we have to be engaged in the process. Not just in the year of a presidential election, but when we're talking about local elections and that kind of thing, if we really want to affect policy change to make it easier, for lack of a better term, to have a more inclusive society in which we live, whether it's in Cleveland or anywhere else in this country. Talk to us a little bit about the importance there, and especially instilling that type of mindset in our young people that are coming up.
Yeah, sure day.
Well, like I said, you know, we're living in a really interesting year of populism on both sides of the aisle, and it's the same thing that we see in South American countries. And the best defense against that populism is education, really being aware, because, you know, people take advantage of ignorance in our society all the time. So if we turn a blind eye, or we hear things and we buy into this narrative, so the most powerful thing we can do is not buy into the BS and call them on it, and be educated enough to say that is advancing you pretty well, but it's not advancing the real cause really well. So I think that's number one. From a business person's perspective, you know, my mom, you know, when we came to the U.S., we had to go out and help people. And that's just, she instilled in all of us. That's what we do. We don't exchange Christmas presents at Christmas. We have to talk about what we've done to help other people. That's the biggest present that you can give. That's the viewpoint that my mom has beat into us. And as a business person, you can't be hypocritical, right? For example, we've built 18 buildings in Northeast Ohio in the last 3 years. Every single one of those, every single one, the economic directors, mayors, elected officials have come to me and say, here's this palette of money we're going to give you to build these dealerships. But see, I look at it and go, if I can't build a dealership without that, I shouldn't build that dealership. Plus, money doesn't grow on trees. If I take that money, for example, from the city of Brook Park, that's less money they have for police and for ambulances and for education and schools. So I can't take millions of dollars from them, the cities, and at the same time give small contributions to help fill the hole that I just created. Right? Although tempting. I will tell you, it is tempting. But you have to reconcile that in your head. So as a business person, you have to, and the only thing you can do is talk to other business people and say, hey, listen, it's great for you and for your shareholders, but where's the responsibility piece of it? Because if not, somebody's eventually going to come along and do exactly what's happening in this election cycle right now. Because if you do have a 1% and this gap of poor people, and if there's kids out there, and there are, that's the biggest problem we have in this country today. There's kids out there who don't think they can achieve anything. That's the biggest crisis we're facing. Isn't a debt crisis or education, it's this crisis of hope. And if you take that away, why would a kid want to get an education? What's in it for me? I'm only going to work at McDonald's anyway. And if I make it to age 20, Jesus, it's a success. So I might as well have fun now, have a baby, drop out of school, go commit some crime, join it. I mean, it's like natural. I mean, it's not illogical to think that way. But if this kid can feel, I can become the president of the United States, I can own a company, I can be a millionaire, I can be a billionaire, I can do whatever it is, or being a great father in a middle-class life is an American dream also. It doesn't have to be about dollars and cents. I think if we can spread that word among our young people today, we'll be in a really, really good position to have engaged kids in civics.
Thank you. This has been a terrific conversation. If I, like a lot of mothers and fathers out there, I feel empowered. Your mother, wow. Smart people in Columbia. Game changer. Game changer. We can change the tenor of the conversation and empower young people, our children, and others. Great conversation. Thank you. I have a small gift for each of you.
Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you.
Dr. Johnson.